I discovered that my wife was a sex toy for college boys and divorced her. 5 years later, we met in a swinger club. Part 2. She told me she had started to see how slow the progression was and how it all began even before we met. As she was nearing graduation, she decided it was time to stop messing around. She always had a thing for shy, quiet types, and I just happened to walk into her life at the right moment. Grace wanted me to know that she genuinely loved me, that it wasn't a matter of her settling for something less. I appreciated that and took it as sincere. We moved on to talking about the imbalance in our relationship. She admitted she had unknowingly taken advantage of my inexperience. If she had a bad day, I would step in and do a little more. If she was stressed, I would pick up extra slack wherever I could. Eventually, that became the pattern. Without even noticing, I ended up doing 75 to 80% of everything around the house. I stopped going out with my friends or playing video games. All my time was spent doing things with her or her friends. Grace confessed that, at the time, she had been completely blind to it. It became the norm before she even realized what was happening. I then asked her about the physical side of our relationship, and while her reasoning didn't make me feel any better, at least there was an explanation. Grace told me about some advice her mother gave her when she was heading off to college. I'm not naive, so here's my advice. Have your fun now, be safe, but get it out of your system. Then find someone, and once you do, start acting like a wife from day one. I was stunned and said, "Are you serious? That's the dumbest advice I've ever heard." Grace admitted she saw it that way too, even back then, but when she met me and saw how little relationship experience I had, that mindset sort of crept in. She thought, I need to take it slow with him, not scare him off, and so she minimized her own experience. Just like the rest of our relationship, that pattern grew into complacency. I was feeling good about the conversation. I knew we still had a lot to work through, but we were heading in the right direction. Maybe there was something to salvage. Then she asked me about my dating life. I answered, but it was clear she regretted asking, likely because she knew I'd return the question. I hadn't heard much about the wedding other than it was a disaster, and that she and Megan were no longer friends. She didn't want to talk about it. When we got to the subject of Ralph, it was hard to hear. I asked how she behaved during that week, and she bluntly said, uninhibited. That wasn't a deal breaker, but I needed time to process it. Then she dropped the news about the pregnancy, and that was the final blow. We both knew it was over. I told her goodbye for the last time. 2 weeks passed, and I found myself reflecting on my life. I was about to turn 30 and knew I didn't want the next 30 years to look like the first. For over a year, I'd been doing the hard emotional work, learning about communication and relationships. I had always given up on every relationship I had. After the pool incident, I dropped all my friends. I made new ones, but lost touch after I left for college, and then did the same thing after college. When I finally said yes to going out with coworkers, I cut them off as soon as Grace came into my life. Now she was gone too, and the only meaningful relationship I had left was with my parents. I realized what I truly needed was to connect with people again. I didn't feel the fear and insecurity I used to. It was time to take real steps toward building connections, whether romantically or just as friends. I had to admit to myself that ever since my therapist gave me that book on ENM, it had been sitting in the back of my mind. I made the decision that this was my new path. I did some research and focused on Tinder, OkCupid, and Field. It took months to find a meaningful match, but during that time I kept working on myself. It was worth the wait, as it set me on a life path that would have seemed impossible just a few years earlier. I had been on the apps for a few months, taking a proactive approach. I looked at different bios, upgrading mine along the way. I even posted it on Reddit for feedback. I also knew I needed relationships beyond just romantic or sexual ones. It had been 3 years since Kevin had last invited me out with the guys. I couldn't blame him for giving up on me. I said yes once, met Grace, and then acted like no one else was worth my time. When I made the effort to invite myself out this time, I was fully prepared for rejection. But not from Kevin. He was still the same extroverted, welcoming guy he had always been, and for some reason he still loved going to Hooters. I went with him a few times, but eventually decided that the weekly bout with XAS, exploding ass syndrome, wasn't worth it. So I started skipping Thursday wings and instead invited Kevin to be my gym bro. He was always complaining about being out of shape, and I'd always been the tall, skinny guy. It was time to try and build a little muscle. I finally matched with someone who felt like an ideal connection, for lack of a better term. Victoria was 28, fresh out of an 11-year monogamous relationship. She was stunning and extroverted. For some reason, I'm always drawn to extroverts despite my natural introversion. We had many conversations before finally deciding on a first date. The biggest focus of our discussions was ensuring we were aligned in the type of relationships we were seeking, especially since we both had ENM, ethical non-monogamy, listed in our profiles. Victoria mentioned that one of the biggest green flags for her was my ability to hold a conversation. She'd gone through a lot of trash just trying to find a few decent matches. For me, it had been the opposite. Few matches, but the ones I did find were usually of high quality. Victoria wanted to explore this lifestyle because she had only ever dated one person. She explained that her previous relationship had simply run its course. As the years passed, they grew apart. She was eager to expand her social circle, meet new people, and go on adventures, while her ex preferred a small, close-knit group of friends and typical low-key gatherings. She had been building up the courage to suggest an open relationship, but before she could, her boyfriend ended things, citing the same differences she had been feeling. When she asked me about my past, I didn't hold back, telling her all about my history. No need to recap that here. I broke it down simply. I had mostly avoided people for 30 years, and now I was going to make up for lost time. With our personal histories out of the way, we discussed what we wanted out of relationships. Victoria said she wanted to have many casual encounters and see which ones might naturally grow into something more. I told her I was more focused on creating deeper bonds, whether romantic or platonic. After about a week of messaging, we decided to meet in person. Our first date was great, though I'll admit, it involved me awkwardly trying to keep up with her on a bike ride. Afterward, we grabbed brunch, if you could call it that. It was 10:30 in the morning, but definitely not breakfast food. We ended the date with our first kiss, and I was excited to see her again. As we parted, I asked if she wanted to meet up later that night. She told me she had plans with someone else but suggested we do something the next day. I had already scheduled pickleball with Kevin and 2 other guys from work, so I said maybe later in the week. She accepted that, and I felt proud of myself. Old me would have canceled on the guys. I won't lie, I did feel a twinge of jealousy knowing she was seeing someone else that night. I sat with that feeling for a while and processed it. It's a natural reaction after all, but I couldn't help wondering why I felt that way. We had both talked at length about the lifestyle we wanted, and for crying out loud, we'd only been on one date. To keep myself occupied, I went to a movie alone, and the next day, I absolutely dominated on the pickleball court. Victoria messaged me that night, and we made plans for Thursday. That was the first time we slept together, and the chemistry was undeniable. I hadn't felt this way about anyone since Grace. After that, things moved quickly. We were messaging each other daily and meeting up 1 to 2 times a week. Victoria had one other guy she was seeing somewhat regularly. Over the next 4 months, our relationship deepened, with more and more overnights together. Her other partner eventually turned into a casual FWB, friends with benefits situation. She said they didn't have much in common besides great sexual chemistry. She had a few short hookups, but they ran their course quickly. As for me, I wasn't having much luck with romantic partners, but I did make a new platonic connection with a female coworker. She was interested in pickleball, and with our growing friendship, I finally had a partner for local co-ed tournaments. As we neared the 5-month mark, Victoria surprised me with a proposition. She asked me to be her official boyfriend. She made it clear she didn't want to change our dynamic. She still wanted an open relationship, which was fine by me. She invited me to her family's Easter celebration and wanted to be able to introduce me as her boyfriend. I was all for it, especially when she reassured me that no one in her family was particularly religious. Easter for them was just a fun holiday filled with BBQ, egg hunts, and candy, and, in her opinion, the best candy holiday. Yeah, she said it. Halloween was second. Our relationship continued to grow. We were spending 3 to 4 nights together each week, had exchanged I love yous, and I was starting to feel a strong sense of compersion for her other relationships. It also helped that I had a life outside of her, especially since I didn't have any other romantic partners at the time. That's when I met partner number 2 and learned that this lifestyle wasn't all rainbows, butterflies, and hot sex. I had matched with Kate, a 41-year-old woman in a newly open marriage. She was eager to meet new people, but honestly, it came off like she was just eager to hook up. Looking back, I can see the red flags, but at the time, I was still new to all this. Victoria had a bad feeling about her but wanted to be supportive since it wasn't often I found a match. Present-day Victoria would not have held back her opinion. I knew Kate was playing the field, and our relationship was mostly physical with occasional texts here and there. I decided that Victoria was my primary partner and let Kate know. She was fine with that. Over the course of 6 months or so, Kate started trying to meet up with me more frequently, calling me her go-to. Around that time, we began having deeper conversations, and she shared more about her marriage. She told me she had never really been satisfied with their sex life during their 15 years of marriage and 17 years together. Definitely an overshare. Kate explained that she had approached her husband about opening up the marriage, and though he was initially very hesitant, he eventually agreed. She hit the dating market hard, while he didn't even try until months later. He had been making more of an effort recently, but Kate confided that he had started talking about wanting to close their marriage, which she was completely against. She kept insisting that if he just put himself out there more, he'd have more success. Out of curiosity, I asked if he'd had any success at all. She said no, and then asked for my opinion on his dating profile. Not exactly what I had planned for the night, but I went along with it. I noticed something odd and asked, "Why does it say physical relationship only on his profile?" She replied, "That's just one of our boundaries. Use protection. Keep each other informed about our dates. No feelings, just sex. Repeat partners are fine unless feelings develop. Then it has to end." I responded, "That might be the issue." She looked confused and asked, "What do you mean?" I explained, "Well, what can he really offer? I'm not surprised he's not having success. Your rules have kind of created a one-sided open relationship." She got defensive. "I don't know what you mean. He has just as much opportunity as I do. He just needs to put himself out there more." In my naivety, I pushed further. "Not really. There are a lot of men looking for casual sex, but the pool of women offering the same thing is much smaller. I mean, what's the oldest guy you've seen since you opened your marriage? Don't take this the wrong way, but we're an obvious example. You're 11 years older than me. Your husband's 44, right? And all he's offering is casual sex. How is he supposed to compete with the 25-year-olds who can offer the same thing?" She visibly bristled at my logic and cut our time short, saying she wasn't feeling well. I wasn't sure if I'd hear from her again, and honestly, I should have ended things right there, but being inexperienced, I didn't. 3 days later, Kate messaged me again, wanting to meet up, excited because her husband had a date that same night. I agreed, and things went on as normal for about 2 more months, though I noticed she seemed more agitated as time went by. Then came the fallout. It was a Thursday, Victoria and I's designated date night. There was a knock at my apartment door, which was unusual. I looked through the peephole and saw Kate. When I opened the door, she barreled in, an emotional wreck. We managed to calm her down enough to ask what was wrong. She told us her husband was leaving her. I tried to offer some sympathy, saying, "I'm really sorry to hear that, but don't you have a sister or someone else you can talk to?" She completely ignored me and started unloading the details. Apparently, her husband's date from 2 months earlier had blossomed into something serious. When Kate asked him if he had feelings for this woman, he admitted he did. Per their agreement, he was supposed to end the relationship, but instead, they fought, and though he agreed to end things, he continued seeing her. When Kate confronted him again, he told her he'd rather end their marriage than his relationship with the other woman. Now she was here, interrupting our date night. We talked her down and told her she needed to either go home or go somewhere else. She got angry at me, and Victoria stepped in, firmly telling her she needed to leave. I backed Victoria up, and Kate stormed out in a huff. I apologized to Victoria over and over, but she just shrugged and said, "Don't worry, one of us was bound to have something like this happen eventually." Later that night, Kate tried calling me, but I messaged her instead, telling her her behavior was unacceptable. I also told her I wouldn't be meeting with her again, and then blocked her. I didn't hear from Kate again after I blocked her, but about a year later, curiosity got the better of me. I used a burner account to check her socials and found out that she had ended up divorced and was now engaged to someone else. That experience taught me a lot. Shortly after that, Victoria and I decided to move in together. I was thrilled to have her as my nesting partner, and once again, she became my only partner. After the whole Kate situation, I felt ready to take a break from dating and focus on my relationship with Victoria and my growing group of platonic friends. I was content with that. I told myself this on a random Tuesday while Victoria was out on a date. The next morning, I woke up next to her, feeling groggy since I hadn't even remembered her coming in. I asked her how her night was, and she casually said, "I want to go to Desires next month. Can you make that happen?" "Yeah, babe, I can make that happen." We ended up going to Pearl, and it was an amazing time. Before the trip, Victoria mentioned she had been fantasizing about seeing me with others. I hadn't really thought about that much. I knew she was with others, but the actual act didn't stir much in me. My joy came from seeing her happy and being able to be herself. We decided to dip our toes into swinging for the first time. I was excited but nervous about potential performance anxiety. Thankfully, my fears didn't last long, and we both settled into the relaxed, fun atmosphere pretty quickly. We met a couple we clicked with and were worried at first that our pool would be small because Victoria is strictly straight, and she has no interest in playing with other women. Given how common that is in the lifestyle, we thought we might be the odd ones out. But those worries faded quickly. We ended up spending most of the week with Mike and Olivia. We full-swapped twice with them, which Victoria loved, and I really enjoyed. Victoria even teased me afterward, saying I had a kid-on-Christmas look on my face. I reminded her, "I think you forget. Olivia was only my 4th ever." She laughed and playfully teased, "Oh, sweetie, I forget you don't have as much sex as I do. We should have gotten a picture for the scrapbook." I replied, "Very funny." The trip was revitalizing for us. Most of the time, we were just enjoying each other. Victoria had one solo hookup on day 4 when I drank way too much and told her to enjoy the night on her own while I slept it off. When we returned from the trip, we had a discussion about incorporating swinging into our lives more often, whenever it fit. I was fully on board. It was easier to find a play partner when Victoria was the one doing the finding. Over the next 2.5 years, life rolled on. We bought a house together and casually tossed around the idea of marriage. Most of Victoria's past partners had moved on, and she wasn't dating as much. I kept in touch with my friends as often as possible, making a conscious effort not to let those relationships lapse, even if I didn't see them as frequently as before. I also formed a long-distance relationship that started online. We met up 2 to 4 times a year, depending on her work travel schedule. I even hooked up with a woman I met during a work conference. When I got back, Victoria surprised me with a cupcake that said, "First Owens, one night stand," and took a picture for the scrapbook. She's such a smartass. We swung here and there, and overall, our experiences were great, except for one couple. This time, I found the connection. I met a couple online who seemed like a great fit, and Victoria agreed they had our vibe. We discussed boundaries with them up front, letting them know Victoria wasn't bi, we were into full swaps, and that was that. They asked if we could do separate rooms. It wasn't our usual thing, but we had done it before, so we agreed. They seemed excited and agreed to all the boundaries. We met for dinner and got along great. They looked like their photos, and everything was going well. After dinner, we invited them back to our place. The plan was for Victoria to take the husband to the spare room while I stayed on the couch with the wife. But the wife kept stalling, asking for another drink, asking random questions about the house, and then saying she needed to use the bathroom even though she'd just gone before we split up. After a while, I heard a voice from down the hall calling me, so I went to the spare room. The wife was in there with Victoria. Victoria looked confused and asked, "She just said you were already tapped out?" I replied, "No, we haven't even started yet." Apparently, the wife had come down to join them, claiming I was done and wanted her to focus on Victoria. Victoria, obviously uncomfortable and uninterested in women, told her no and called me in, thinking the story was far-fetched. Annoyed, I said, "Really? You two are wife poachers? And not even subtle about it?" The husband got angry and denied it, but I wasn't having it. "Yeah, you are. And you're bad at it. We were crystal clear about what we were up for." The wife tried to explain. "I wasn't sure if you were interested, so I thought we could focus on her. She wouldn't have to touch me." That really ticked me off. "Wasn't sure I was interested? You want me to tie a flag to my hard-on next time? What am I saying? There won't be a next time." Before I could finish, Victoria stepped in and said, "You two need to get out of our house right now." I backed her up, and the couple stormed out, clearly upset. That was the last time we heard from them. After that night, we took a break from extracurricular activities. Victoria was between partners, so she logged out of her apps for a while. I was only seeing my long-distance partner, and that was once every 2 to 6 months for a single night. For about a year, it was just the two of us, 99% of the time, and that's when I decided to propose. Victoria said yes immediately, and we agreed that a quick courthouse wedding would be more fun, putting all our money toward an epic honeymoon instead. We started our honeymoon in New Orleans, doing all the touristy stuff and messing up the hotel bed every night. Then, one day, Victoria looked at me and said, "Since we're here, we have to check out Colette." I was down. We hadn't played in forever, so why not? We were enjoying ourselves at the club when Victoria bumped me and shouted in my ear, "Isn't that your ex-wife?" I followed her gaze, and sure enough, there was Grace. A moment later, Ralph, her husband, walked up and handed her a drink. Our eyes met, and I think we both had the most WTF moment of our lives. I hadn't seen Grace in 5 years, and there I was, 1,000 miles from home, at a swinger club in New Orleans, staring at my ex-wife, who, by the way, was wearing a dress that barely covered anything. I hadn't seen her in anything that revealing since her Hooters days. I think I did a triple take. She had the same shocked look on her face. The four of us slowly made our way toward each other. It started with an awkward hug for Grace and a handshake for Ralph. I introduced Victoria, and it felt good to say, "This is my wife." We made small talk about the club. Grace and Ralph shared that it was their first time at a place like this, and their first attempt at taking their bedroom activities outside their own home. Victoria and I said it was our first time in a club too, but that we had been in the lifestyle for a few years. There were some awkward pauses, and it seemed like Grace wanted to say something. Victoria noticed and, in her usual straightforward way, said, "Ralph, your drink's almost empty. Let me get you another so these two can have their 5-year-old conversation." He laughed and said, "Oh my God, thank you." If the tension got any worse, I was about to start breakdancing. And just like that, they headed off to the bar. Grace turned to me and said, "You look really good." I replied, "You too." Then she dove into it. "I'm still really sorry for how things ended. After that wedding, I wanted you back so badly. I realized how awful I was to you during our marriage." I looked at her and said, "It's all water under the bridge. You got me out of my shell when I was ready to be alone forever, and for that, I thank you. In a weird way, without those issues, I wouldn't have the life I have now." We shared one more awkward hug before our spouses returned. As we rejoined the group, Victoria looked at me and asked, "So, what's the plan?" I responded, "Well, it's a night with a lot of single guys. Want to make your MFM fantasy a reality?" She lit up, kissed me, and said, "You're the best." Victoria found another married guy whose wife was off doing her own thing. While we were busy, I noticed Grace and Ralph had come in and were watching. When the other guy was done, Victoria and I went to get drinks. She headed to the bathroom, and Grace approached me again. She told me she and Ralph had talked, and he thought Victoria was amazing and would be up for a swap if we were interested. Then she asked, "And you?" She hesitated a bit and said, "I thought maybe we could get, closure." I looked at her, still stunning, and said, "I appreciate the offer, but not a chance in hell." Then I laughed. Grace laughed too and said, "Ouch, rejected. I guess now I know how it feels." We shared a quick hug and parted ways. Victoria and I headed back to the hotel. After that night, we all became social media friends, but the only interactions we've had are the occasional happy birthday message. Grace and Ralph are still together, and they have 2 kids now. As for Victoria and me, we're still going strong a decade later. We take our open relationship pretty casually these days, neither of us actively pursuing partners, just indulging when the opportunity presents itself. We still visit the occasional club or resort, but during this time, I did face my most devastating breakup. After years of dominating the co-ed pickleball courts, my partner dumped me for her new boyfriend, my buddy Kevin. We still joke about the loss. I lament it because Victoria refuses to play, and she complains because Kevin is, well, terrible at the game.